Care Farming Network is a program of Red Wiggler Care Farm located in Maryland, and we work to connect both established and aspiring care farms, foster meaningful support, and build awareness around the transformative power of care farming. We're focusing now on building community with and for care farms in our network and providing resources for care farmers across the United States, including a map of care farms, an online resource library. We provide consultations for care farmers and convene gatherings both virtually and in person. And today we are really excited to hear from beekeeping experts with incredible knowledge to share about the therapeutic and vocational aspects of beekeeping. As you'll hear today, this approach has been shown to help reduce symptoms of PTSD, anxiety, and depression, while also building skills like patience, emotional regulation, and mindfulness. So whether you're joining us today as a beekeeper or an aspiring practitioner or just curious about this therapy, we hope that we will leave both inspired and a little bit in awe of the healing power of bees. So we have some presenters joining us today. Adam and Lacey Ingrao are the founders of Beewise Farms in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan and Heroes to Hives. And we have Monica Schmidt, who is director of Mission Believe, located in Maryland. And the way today will work is our presentations will last approximately 45 minutes. And as always, we'll have about 15 minutes for Q&A discussion. So as our presenters are sharing with us, if you do have questions, please feel free to either hold them for Q&A or go ahead and put them in the chat, and we'll make sure that we get to those. So yeah, we're very excited to learn with you all today. Very grateful to our presenters for sharing their knowledge with us. And so let's get started with Adam and Lacey.
Wonderful. Thank you, Kate. I'm going to share our screen here. You all should be able to see our presentation at this point. Well, I'll start out by introducing myself. My name is Adam Ingrao. I'm an entomologist and the co-founder and national director of the Heroes to Hives program, as well as the co-owner of Beewise Farms.
And I am Lacey Ingrao. I'm also the co-founder of Heroes to Hives and run and operate Beewise Farms and have been in the transpersonal and somatic movement world for about the last 2 decades.
And what we're going to be talking about today is a program that we are currently running with the Department of Veterans Affairs called the Be Calm, Be Well program. And I'm going to give you all a little bit of background about us. So the Heroes to Hives program is the nation's largest ag education program for military service members. We're celebrating 10 years of the program this year and have trained over 15,000 students, veterans and their family members in the art and science of beekeeping. And this year we have a little over 3,200 students in our course this year. It's a free 9-month course that we provide that's basically a beginning beekeeping course for folks. And the Hives program, who is our partner on this particular project, is the Honeybee Initiative for Veterans Empowerment and Support. And that is a Department of Veterans Affairs program. And we have been working with them. They established in 2019. We've been working with them since they established. And basically what they do is they offer therapeutic intervention using beekeeping as a modality for that intervention within the rec therapy programs within the VA. And currently there's 3 VA medical centers, 3 including the Manchester VA Medical Center in New Hampshire, where it's based out of. So also Palo Alto, Kansas City, and Oklahoma City is where that program lies. So the work that we're going to be talking about is a collaboration between these 2 organizations to develop what is basically the Be Calm, Be Well program. And therapeutic beekeeping, the reason that we kind of started this collaboration was because the 2 programs, because we do a lot of evaluation in our programs, we had a ton of anecdotal evidence from our students saying that beekeeping was helping them with things like anxiety and depression, isolation, giving them a sense of purpose. But previous to what our research, there is no peer-reviewed research showing that. So there's no real research out there in peer-reviewed journals that demonstrates that animal therapy using honeybees can actually result in benefits to mental health. And so what we saw was an opportunity to collaborate with the Department of Veterans Affairs to actually start doing that work. And that has resulted in a lot of really exciting data and practices that we're going to be sharing with you today. But to kind of start off this whole idea of therapeutic beekeeping, I like to always talk about the historical context. Bees have been a part of the human experience for millennia. And humans have been keeping bees, the active management of honeybees, since ancient Egypt. About 4,500 years, we have the lineage of actual beekeepers. And in these ancient traditions, bees were seen as a lot more than just livestock. In fact, in Egypt, we have traditions where bees were actually a gift from the sun god Ra, and actually were an extension of the sun god Ra, and were developed by the tears of Ra raining upon the earth and turning into bees. And the bees gather the nectar from the plants that is the gift from the gods. In Celtic traditions, bees were seen as intermediaries actually between the world of the living and the world of the dead. And so you have ceremony and things like that around bees actually being a part of the family. So when someone passes away, they notify the bees that the individual passed away. Jimmy Carter, they actually just did a ceremony for telling the bees at Jimmy Carter's old farm just several weeks ago after he passed away. And then in Slovenian traditions, more modern traditions, bees are actually seen as healers. And so bees are used in things like you see this picture here on the bottom left of apitherapeutic activities where this individual is actually laying on a set of beehives, getting the vibrational therapy from the bees, while also intaking the air from the bees that is used in a lot of respiratory therapies and particularly in Slovenia. The research that we've done with the VA is published research, and this is the publication that we published in the Therapeutic Recreation Journal. And I'm just going to not really get into the details of methods or anything like that today, but what I am going to talk about is kind of the high-level thing. So this was a study that we did within the VA with VA patients where they would be surveyed before and after a beekeeping experience. So before they went into the bee yard, they were given a survey. We used the EQ5D5L, which is a standardized psychological assessment that looks at 5 parameters plus overall health. And those parameters we'll talk about here in just a moment. But this study was done, and basically we did the pre-survey and then the post-survey, and we looked at what the difference was before they got in the bee yard doing this beekeeping therapeutic experience and after. And what we found was very interesting in this study. The first thing that we found that was significantly different was mobility. So individuals reported to us that before they went into the bee yard, they were actually more mobile than they left. And that actually tells us a lot because for those of you that are beekeepers, the Langstroth hive, which is the industry standard in the United States, is a very physical hive. It requires a lot of lifting. Boxes can oftentimes weigh 50 to 100 pounds when you're moving them around. And for veterans with disabilities, that could definitely have a negative effect. So that result kind of tells us that maybe alternative hives are something that we should be looking at, like the Slovenian Aja hive or top bar hives. So that was a very interesting result. We saw a 7.5% decrease in mobility with these groups. But when we saw anxiety and depression, one of the most amazing results that we saw in this study was almost a 31% reduction in reports of anxiety and depression after doing a beekeeping activity. And one of the interesting things that we saw that we'll be looking in future research on is how long does that residual last? Do we see this result carrying on for 2 or 3 weeks after a beekeeping experience? And this is work that we're working on currently. So anxiety and depression, significant reductions, like I said, almost a 31% drop in that. And then the VAS, which is a total assessment of overall health, your own perception of overall health, we saw almost a 10% increase in perceptions of overall health. So actually feeling like I'm a healthier individual by doing this activity. So those are the results that we saw in the research that we've been doing with the VA. And Lacey's going to be sharing with you now what are the practices that we actually are using in this particular research. So I'm going to pass it over to Lacey.
Thank you so much. So here it is just a list of the ones that we're going to go through kind of more intently. And as Adam mentioned earlier, these practices are not new, right? We just, however, adapt them for these times. So before we jump into the practices themselves, I'm going to invite you to participate with me in just a 3-breath gratitude practice. Okay? And here we offer some gratitude to the people who have come before us, who allow us to now share this knowledge. On your time, taking a nice deep breath in to gratitude, and exhale. And inhale. And exhale. To all those who come before us, nice deep breath in. And exhaling all our gratitude. And we can see in such a short, brief practice how impactful the breath can be, how it can move in just 3 breaths, how it can shift the nervous system to move just a little slower and a little softer, right? We do these practices because we know that going into the apiary can oftentimes feel tense, can feel rushed. And so we practice here to allow ourselves to calm in those moments and to help us understand ourselves a little better during those challenging times. Anybody who's been in an apiary knows that the body is strained, right? That's one of the things we talked about before, is that mobility is an issue. And so here, with Yoga for Beekeepers, we practice on very specific areas of the body, and we utilize a sequence of movements that focus on the arms, the back, the shoulders. And this practice helps us to mentally and physically shift going into the apiary. One of the main areas is core and pelvic floor, and these areas being so vital as not only as we go into the apiary, but as we age. And so having that understanding helps us move a little differently and with a little bit more mindfulness as we enter those spaces. It is no secret that gratitude, a shift in gratitude and having those practices allows us to shift the mind and body almost immediately. It's a beautiful, essential grounding practice that improves mood, helps us get out of the mind and into the body. It increases positive emotions to what we have versus what we don't have, and builds stronger relationships with not only our partners, the bees, but all of the exposure and nature as a whole. And this practice is, the hope is that we start outside in this very simple place of nature, but bringing it indoors, right? How do we get grateful for everything that we have in these moments? When it comes to a sensory practice, we start very simply outside of the apiary. And we may work on visualization here, as well as taking herbs and using the senses, whether it's moving them across the skin or taking them in through the nose. We allow this practice to heighten all of the areas of the senses. Creating and crossing a threshold. In a lot of the work that we do, we take from transition models, and there's a lot of different transitional models out there. This one, the basics of the threshold being that we're moving from one world to another, and crossing the threshold can be done with physical material. It can be done by a line drawn in the sand, right? But it's this concept that we're moving from this world of doing and this world of moving all of the times and effort to create things and do things to softening and being with the bees in a little bit of a different way. Collectively, if you're on the farm with a lot of different people, this is a wonderful practice to have folks go and collect things from the area, things that call to them, that speak to them, and come back and create that threshold so everybody moves together. As we move across the threshold, this work specifically is based around intention. How do we move from one world to another? How do we enter the world from outside into our homes, or from our busy day into the apiary? What does that intention look like? And allowing that threshold to bring us back to that intention when we need to. Bee bathing. What a beautiful opportunity to become the most extreme naturalist that we can become. Right? This is an immersive experience, very similar to forest bathing, adapted from that idea of forest bathing, which really has a high capacity to decrease stress, anxiety, depression, lower blood pressure. But here we begin to observe all of the things that nature has to offer without imposing any of us, without doing anything. We're going and we're sitting in these spaces and observing what we hear, see, smell, all of those senses going into action. Communing with bees. As Adam mentioned, this practice comes from a Celtic myth or tradition called telling the bees. And because they are messengers, the myth says that if you didn't tell the bees of this major transition, let's say someone passing away in your family, there would be a penalty to pay, essentially, right? All of your bees would abscond in the spring, or you would have a low honey harvest. But here in the practice of Be Calm and Be Well, we allow this practice to reduce isolation. It is oftentimes so hard to speak about our traumas that are happening in our life on a regular basis, but allowing ourselves to go and speak to another organism that's not going to judge us, it's not going to have anything to say back. It is simply there to witness. It has moved the strongest of soldiers, as we have witnessed, to simply just break and be with this being, this beautiful being. Our active meditation, this is kind of taking all of these other practices together and bringing them into one, right? We practice mindfulness here. We practice awareness and breathing, and that intention as we cross into that, from that threshold into our apiary, setting that intention as we go into that meditation. And here we get to spend so much time practicing patience with the hive. There's almost this calm that comes about the apiary when you have a group of people practicing this one space, this one practice of mindfulness with your bees. No one's agitated. The bees aren't agitated. Everybody is, there is this calmness when someone takes out a bee and maybe even brushes their hand over to feel that vibration or to feel that hum. That's the purpose of our active meditation, to give people that very immersive, deep experience of being with a beehive. And then our guided imagery. I love this one because it really makes accessibility to everybody. It brings accessibility to everybody. We can take the idea and the visualization of being an active participant in the hive and bring it to just sitting in a chair or in a group with people, where we take time to visualize ourselves going through that entire process of what it looks like to be in a hive, to take out a frame, to look for the eggs, the larvae, all of those in-depth inspection things that we do on a regular basis. And even though we're not actively going into the hive and being with nature like a lot of these other practices, this practice specifically is very powerful in reducing that level of anxiety and uncertainty in going into a hive. Oh,
Little animation for you. So that's a little short information about the practices that we are doing. If you're interested in learning more about this work, we are currently doing a professional development training for VA clinicians and staff. And so if you are a member of the VA as far as clinical staff or something like that, that training is available on TMS currently, which, for those of you who don't know who I'm talking about, TMS is the internal continuing education platform for the VA. For those of you that are external to the VA and are interested in this type of work, this QR code is available for you to scan, to fill out a form, an interest form, to be notified when we start the online and on-ground training of this. So the grant that we're working on for this project is a professional development grant. So we're looking to train clinical staff that are working with individuals that are dealing with trauma, veterans included, or professional beekeeping educators who are looking to incorporate this type of work into their own work. We will be doing this training also for just individuals that are interested in providing this type of therapeutic intervention as well. So if you want to scan that, you can fill out that form, and we will notify you when our online course is available, which is going to be later in 2025. kind of to wrap us up, therapeutic beekeeping interventions, really, we have shown that they can reduce anxiety and depression in veterans. And I think that although our study group and who we work with primarily are service members, I believe that this work can be translated to anybody that is dealing with trauma. Animal therapy is well established with other organisms like canine therapy, equine therapy, and apitherapy is just another aspect of human animal therapeutic intervention. Um, the one thing is that I think we all need to be aware of that we saw in our research is the need for alternative hive styles and things like the Aja hive and top bar hives that are much more accessible and don't require the physicality of the Langstroth hive. And so I think that's a major finding from our study as well. We do see overall improvements in individuals who participate in this work as far as overall improvements in health. And I can tell you, the two of us can tell you from 10 years of working with thousands of military service members, many of them will tell you that bees have saved their lives. And although that's hard to quantify in a study, the anecdotal evidence is overwhelming. We do need more need for replication with work like this, and we are working on that currently with the VA. And we're also interested to see if this result stands true for individuals outside of the VA as well, because this was in a particularly closed setting. And I'll leave you all with a little bit of our contact information if anybody wants to get a hold of us. We'll leave that on for one more second. And there we go. Send it back to you, Kate.
Thank you. And we're going to also make this presentation available afterwards, and we'll make sure that your contact information is shared that way too. So thank you, Adam. Thank you, Lacey. And Monica, I'm lost you on my screen here.
Oh,
But
I'm
Monica,
here. I'm here.
you
Let me share
are.
my screen.
Yes,
And
please.
what a wonderful presentation, Adam and Lacey. That just really kind of builds the foundation of, why we do what we do and the impact that bees really, truly can have on an individual's life. I always say beekeeping saved my life. And that's why I started Mission Believe. So my name is Monica Schmidt. I'm the director of Mission Believe. We are an educational and therapeutic beekeeping program for active duty veterans and first responders and their immediate family and caregivers. Let me get my presentation working. Here we go. So we were established in June of 2020. We launched this program during the pandemic, and it was very challenging. We were like, how are we going to pull this off, being pretty much in a virtual platform life at that point. So we had developed Mission Believe to be an educational program. So we created a Zoom platform for the initial start of the program, and then we have hands-on experience. So our mission is to provide active duty veterans and first responders a free beekeeping education through virtual beekeeping class, workshops, and hands-on training. So we are kind of like the first step to the beekeeping experience. And after you take our beginner class, we influence you to join, if you're a veteran, to join Adam's class. His 9-month class is so dynamic, and this kind of gets you interested to see if this is something you're going to do. We provide monthly meetings, so we have a network that you're able to join in and talk to. So you start with our beginner class, and you get involved. So once you go through our 7-week beginner class, we provide you with a beginner certificate, and with that certificate, you can actually take it to other programs to show that you took a beginner beekeeping class. But we do encourage you to step on to Adam's class, because it is a great way to continue your beginner education. The nice thing is our class runs 3 times a year, so we have the availability to have people join our organization and not lose interest. We want to make sure that we're present and available for these individuals who are getting into beekeeping. When you're learning beekeeping, it's like learning a foreign language. And we structured Mission Believe to be in person support system for our service members to be successful and sustainable in beekeeping. So we created all kinds of different levels. We have our beginner beekeeping class, and we support them from beginner through master level. We teach about hobbyist beekeeping, commercial beekeeping, and we do a lot of different vocational training to make your operation become sustainable. This is our team. This is Emily from the left. This is Emily Gannon. She's our Director of Education. This is Tristan Bannon. He is one of the founders, and he's also our field director. So he's out there in the apiaries, making sure that our hive dives are run successfully and our workshops are all coordinated appropriately. And he manages most of the apiaries along with me, so it's nice. And John Cullum is our vice president now. He was the first member of Mission Believe when we started the organization. And of course, there's me, the executive director. And John, we always like to kind of pinpoint him. He is vice president. He is my bouncing board for all the end decisions with this program. But we're really proud of him. He was our first partner. I met him in our beginner beekeeping class, and I was his mentor. And we've been beekeeping together for 8 years. And he's only lost one colony, and that was last year, and it was my fault. So it wasn't him, but he officially had lost one of his colonies. And we're really proud of him. He's turned his beekeeping hobby into a business. He's opened up a workshop in Mission Believe, and he provides woodenware for the beekeeping community throughout Maryland. So his business is called Whistle Pig Woodcraft. Just a shout out for his business. And it's really nice to see how a program like this can support somebody and encourage them to, build something like this in his life. And, this is what's restored that purpose and given him reason every single day to get up and get out the door and something to live for. And, that's what Mission Believe and Heroes to Hives is all about. So what we provide a 7-week beginner virtual beekeeping course. Our next one runs May 20th. So registration is still open. We do have monthly in the hive training during the beekeeping season with experienced beekeepers. We also hold our monthly partner meetings. And each month that is held on the third Wednesday of the month, and that is virtual. So we are able to reach farther than just our local community. And that is on the third Wednesday of the month at 7 p.m. We have mentor support in certain areas and other programs to be able to, and beekeeping organizations to be able to get support through. And then we do continued education through workshops and seminars, and there's so much more. So I'm going to talk a little bit about our beginner course. So we do have a really dynamic 7-week beginner virtual beekeeping course. Each section was done by an influential beekeeper. What we were finding is our service members don't want to ask for help, so they're going to turn to YouTube and all these other resources, and they were struggling with their bees. So what we decided to do was to put this class together with influential beekeepers that have educational resources available for after they're done with this class, that they could go out silently and go get other help if they needed. We wanted them to know who to turn to get the good information from. So that's why we built our class the way we did. So we also hold workshops. These are lots of different pictures from different workshops that we've held. From installing new colonies, we've got queen rearing workshops. Here's one, they're marking and they're doing woodworking. We wax rendering. So there's lots of different opportunities throughout the season to basically grow and expand your beekeeping business. So our monthly hive dives, we really feel, especially for newer beekeepers, that these monthly hive dives especially if you're in our area or in a lot of people's areas, the beekeeping organizations have teaching apiaries. So you have a lot of different areas you can get hands-on access. And we feel that this is very, very important. A lot of our members who join Mission Believe, we really ask them not to get bees their first year, spend their first year learning beekeeping. Get involved with your local organizations if you're local to us or any of our affiliates where you can get hands-on experience. Get out there, get involved, get into the bees, and make sure that this is something that you want to do. Beekeeping is not a cheap hobby. It's a very great therapeutic hobby, but it's not cheap. So, and it's not easy sometimes. So this is something that you really are thinking about doing. Take the time and get involved and experience with the bees. At Mission Believe, we do host our monthly hive dive. It's on the third Sunday of the month at 11 a.m. at the Mission Believe farm. And during these hive dives, like this month, is going to be new colony install for all of our newbies who are getting their nukes in their packages. We show them how to install their nukes in their packages. And then we'll inspect some of the existing colonies in the apiary so they can see how we inspect our hives as they're beginning their beekeeping season. So even if you don't have bees, you have that opportunity to get out there and get your hands sticky in the hives and experience what's going on. We have a lot of beekeepers who followed our program by not getting bees their first year, waiting, and they have been very successful. Tristan walks around and brags all the time how his mentees don't lose hives, and most of his mentees have taken that year not to get bees and wait to the following year. Give them that time to learn, go to each meeting, go to the hive dives, get involved with your local community beekeeping association, and then dive in the following year. So this is our home base. We have a small farm. It's only about 18 acres. We're located in Tawnytown, Maryland. We're about 15 minutes south of Gettysburg, PA. So we're really sitting there on the line. I always joke around and say if I spit, I can spit into PA. But this is where we host all of our workshops, our in the hive training. We have all kinds of different special events that happen throughout the year. We do some healing events. We have like Earth Day, we had an Earth Day yoga healing celebration. It was really nice to get people kind of connected to the earth, and there's a lot of fun activities, and we just really would like to have people get involved. So it's really all about creating community and a true support system. We pride ourselves at Mission Believe about the live representation. When you're learning beekeeping, it's like learning French. So we run our beekeeping course for those 7 weeks. We are live while you all are learning. You have the ability to ask your questions and make sure that you have a true understanding of beekeeping before you jump into beekeeping fully. And we want that. And that's our monthly meetings are about, is when you're beekeeping and you have a question, you have the ability to email us. If you just want to wait to our monthly meeting, you can jump on the monthly meeting. We take time to have people ask their questions, have the availability to hear from different beekeepers. We have different master beekeepers that join each meeting that be able to answer the questions and see from all different sides and different perspectives. So it's really important to be able to grow as a beekeeper, to have these nifty things at your fingertips. So as you heard Adam talk about the Sylvanian, style therapeutic beehives, we decided to build one a couple of years ago. As a beekeeper, this was an obsession of mine to really introduce to our program. When I started beekeeping, the first video I ever watched about beekeeping was with a Sylvanian hive. And I thought how beautiful and romantic this style was. And this little house that they're kept in, and it's just so beautiful. But as I grew as a beekeeper, I really grew that true understanding about apitherapy and understanding the full effects of having a therapeutic bee house. So we do have a therapeutic bee house at the Mission Belief Farm that we use for ADA accessible beekeeping and also for air and buzz therapy. And it's really been a fantastic addition. It's nice to see, especially when we have our hive dives. We'll have a couple partners who wander away and you go find them in there in the bee house, or they'll come out of the bee house. Oh, I just got lost in there. And I love that. That's what we built this for, was to bring some solitude and healing for them that they can experience at free will. So we are currently fundraising. We have been fundraising to construct a honey house for our service members. One of the most expensive aspects of beekeeping is buying all the extracting equipment. So we've been fundraising, and we're currently in the process of making some of this transition to be able to provide this honey room, an extracting facility for our service members to be able to extract their honey. So we're really excited to be working on that. So I wanted to remind everybody to register online for our next online class. It will be on Tuesday evenings for 7 weeks at 7 p.m. Eastern time via Zoom, May 20, and it runs through from May 20th through June 30th. So I did a short presentation, Kate. I'm going to stop right here because I have a whole therapeutic presentation too, but since Adam and Lacey just did their magnificent one, I really feel like it'll be a redundant of information. So I don't know what you would like me to do. If you would like me to keep going, or we could stop and take some questions. It'd give us a little bit more time for questions.
Well, why don't we see, I see a few questions in the chat, and then if we wanted to come back and look at any of the other slides, that would be great. I'll go
Yeah,
ahead.
that's fine, because I just feel like it'll just be kind of a redundant of information, and I think they
Yeah.
just did such a beautiful presentation of going into the true therapeutic aspects and what you receive from the bees. So
Well, thank you. Thank you, Monica and Adam and Lacey. And yeah, first, I just welcome anybody to put a question in chat if you have one. And I am going to migrate there myself because I think I saw a few that were already in there. Or you can also raise your hand or just ask it too. It looks like David, you had a
That would
question
be
about,
me.
yeah.
Sorry. Hi.
Hi,
Let me hold on. There we go.
there you are.
Hey, nice to see you. Yeah, I want to say, first of all, to compliment Adam again, because I saw him at the recent conference, Agribility Conference in Las Cruces, and amazing, got me all excited, of course, about everything. But I have a question. This year I started working with solitary bees, and I have a lot of questions with the entomologists about pressures on native bees and so on and so forth. And then we're working that out, but it's a whole different way of raising bees, and it's much more friendly. There's no bee suits involved. It's a very it's intermittent. It's like right now we're letting the cocoons hatch, and we'll do a little bit of work with it, and then we just let them let them sit. And our big thing then is to have habitat. So it's a very different way of approaching bees, and it's for pollination only. So it's very specific. So we can actually encourage people, I think, to use these little guys as pollinators, because you can move them around just like we do the honeybee pollinating groups. So that's where I am right now. And I think, why not? In my little yard here, my little mini farm, it's like eighth of an acre, but I have a honeybee hive, a workshop, and now the solitary bees. And of course we grow stuff. Saffron is a big push this fall. So that could be a moneymaker. I don't know. But I'd like to know about the vet connection, because we have a situation where we could have 2 or 3 people. It's just not as dramatic. It's showing all the lawns and the flowers. I live in New Mexico, man. It's desert. So we don't have lots of meadows and stuff unless you go to the mountains. So that's all I want to say. I would love to get involved, and there's many ways to do it. So
David, it's nice seeing you again. I
hey,
do.
how you doing, Adam? Yeah,
Conference.
I remember you. Yeah.
Yeah, we had a great conversation. And I would say, building on what David said, is that, the thing that we all have to recognize, number one, is that honeybees are not native to North America. They're not native to the Americas. We are a continent of mainly solitary bees, and then our historic ancestors like the Aztec and the Maya kept stingless honeybees, which do produce honey, but they're stingless.
Right.
And those are very few and far between. But I think this type of work can be integrated into any organism that you're working with and trying to develop a closer relationship with. I would say it could work with our plant relatives, it can work with our insect relatives, it can work with all of these different systems. It's what we're really trying to get at with all of these practices is just deepening the human connection between us and another organism. And I think that's what really is at the cusp of all of this work. It really doesn't matter who you're working with, whether it's a canine or a horse or a plant, a solitary bee or a honeybee. All of these practices can be incorporated into those settings. But I really appreciate your comments, and it's great to see you again.
Yeah, sure. It's good to see you too. And so I would, on top of that, I don't know what's going on in my area. I did notice a greeting from Albuquerque, and that would be a good person to talk to. But one of the things I want to throw out is that I have a very close friend that has a vet home. They have a person in their home that's cared for actually till end of life, or until they find another home. So the thing is this is not uncommon here. I'm thinking about 15 vets that are housed in similar situations. So they're inside somebody's home, and that's where they live. Well, they have backyards, they have all sorts of activities, and a lot of times the vets don't want to paint a bunch of pictures and do meaningless stuff. What we're doing is really meaningful. And so I'd like to push it into that, just as a pilot way of looking at it, like an individual yard where other vets could come to that place and they have a similar connection. But it's not a great big apiary. It's just a single colony back there that we can manage. And like I said, a workshop, I can make stuff. They can come to my workshop and sit around and chat. I'm an old Vietnam guy, so we love to chat. So let's get out there and sit around in those little areas and make stuff and do whatever we want. And you got bees to look at if you want to do one yourself, or you can help maintain that. And like, we got stupendous honey this year on one little thing, and then she took off. So I've got a new queen. All these things are really valid lessons, and they connect you more and more and more to our life. Seems almost impossible, but yet look at those bees. They manage it, and we've got to learn from those guys. And so that's kind of my push. So that's what I wanted to throw out. We do have a way to maybe develop the program in a different way and bring in the solitary bees. I'm quite fascinated with them. So I don't want to talk too much. So thank you. Sorry.
No, thanks, David. I also had the pleasure of seeing Adam at the Agribility Conference and hearing the presentation, so I can understand your enthusiasm for wanting to.
And I saw you too. So
yeah, absolutely.
I remember you. Yeah, exactly.
Anyone else have any questions? I think on a personal, I am 1 year into beekeeping. I guess this would be my second year. I wanted to kind of explore what you both were talking about, just around that therapeutic benefit of what happens to folks, the mindfulness, the presence, the slowing down that you need to have with bees. Monica, I think in a previous conversation we had talked about your beehive and just the pheromones that bees, emit.
That's the bee air. Yeah, that's the
The
whole
air.
AB therapy aspect of the therapeutic bee house is being in that bee air and how it relaxes you and the sound of the bee. But that applies in the apiary too. So Kate, when you walk up to your colony, you take that minute, you see what's going on, what kind of activity you have. You look at the front entrance, when you open your hive, you hear their hum. All of that is about that healing aspect because that's where, your focus is in on those bees. So what are we learning, teaching? What are the bees teaching you? They're teaching you to focus, right? And once you're in those bees, you're immersed into those bees. And as soon as you get distracted from those bees, they get loud. And they're like, hey, you are supposed to be looking at us, not other things. You can't think about everything else. You need to think only about us. And that brings that in. Um, Honeybees are truly amazing. If we listen to what they teach us, they teach us the focus, the purpose, the reason to get up and get out. Native bees, we teach about native bees and I have like 8 houses hanging on the side of my house right here because they bore in my wood. So why not provide them homes so they just leave the wood of my house alone? And it
That's for
works,
sure.
they're truly important, and that's what these programs are about. And it can come from any aspect, like Adam was saying. But what, the beauty about beekeeping, not only is that it gives you, it gives you something to do, something to look forward to. You're learning, and then suddenly that creates this purpose in your life. You wake up and you feel like you're somebody, not that you're nobody, nobody can see you. Your bees can see you. Your bees need you. And when your bees are healthy, that makes you feel successful and your journey. And so that's all part of the healing process. The mindfulness and the focus of when you're inspecting those colonies, like we were just talking, they will let you know that you're not paying attention. So if you got your mind on other things, negative thoughts, anything, those bees feel that. You'll hear their hum go from a hum to a buzz to a roar, and they feel your stress, they feel your anxiety. So what happens is you quickly teach yourself to stay focused in on these frames. And when you learn how to do that just in the beehive, you start using that in your everyday life. You know how to stay in that present moment instead of falling back to something old. And honeybees truly give us that opportunity to learn that. And when you see your colony, you go through a full season and you come out of winter and it's a warm early spring winter day and you see those bees fly. It, that is like the best feeling ever. You really have that true sense of accomplishment that you've done something, and that really can restore life into someone who doesn't feel like they have much to live for. When they see, the direct outcomes of their efforts, it's so impactful on one's mental health, you know. And you also got to talk about like the physical benefits of beekeeping. You know, a lot of people, we have a gentleman who joined our organization 3 years ago, and his brother had been part of the organization. He was one of our original partners. And he met us at an expo for the American Legion. And I had asked if his brother would come up and talk about the organ, what he's like, how he feels like he's benefit from the program. And afterwards, they kind of hung around and, they pulled me to the side and he said to me that he hadn't been out of his house in 73 days and that this is so inspiring and he can't wait to take the class and get involved. And we are 3 years later, and him, his brother, and one of our mentors in our program out on the Eastern Shore are starting a veterans like a satellite hands-on facility for us out on the Eastern Shore, which is 4.5 hours away from our headquarters. That's
Yeah.
the kind of impact that honeybees truly can have on one's life. But it's not just the honeybees, it's these programs that are available. It's, this one-on-one relationships that you build with all the beekeepers. Everybody asks, why would you start a veterans beekeeping program in beekeeping? Like a veterans program in beekeeping? I truly believe in my heart that the beekeeping community is one of the most welcoming communities. We all come from a different walk of life. It doesn't, some of them are like astroscientists, some of them are almost homeless. I know homeless beekeepers that they're vagabonds. They live in vans and they move their bees all over the country. And that's what they do. And that's where they're happy, but nobody judged them. So
Yeah.
it's one of the most judgment-free zones you can go and be somebody.
I-
The one thing I always like to teach in our class is that, you can't let the past define you. You always have that chance to redefine yourself. And beekeeping was that avenue for me. And, I want to make sure that people understand and can get that same impact that I got.
Thanks,
So I had
Martha.
something I wanted to ask.
Hey-
I started.
Hey, David, I'm
interrupt.
sorry. I'm gonna interrupt for 1 second because we do have a number of questions in chat and we only
Yeah,
have
I wanted
10
to
minutes
answer one of
left.
those questions. Yeah,
Well, let me just pose to the
Sure.
presenters
Go
if I might. Just
yeah, go ahead.
somebody has a question about speaking to the pros and the cons of the top bar hives versus the Langstroth. For accessibility and programming, they specifically work with people with intellectual and developmental disabilities and varying levels of mobility. And I know you touched on this before, but for those that might not be aware of those differences.
So the Langstroth, the long Langstroth hive, which is a horizontal hive, and the top bar hive, also known as the Kenyan top bar hive, were both horizontal hives that work very good for accessibility. With the work we do with agribility, those are two recommendations we generally make for individuals with mobility restrictions, is being able to use one of those styles of hives. Kind of the pros and cons of each one. The Kenyan top bar hives are top bar hives, so you don't use any foundation, meaning that the bees have to make all the wax themselves, and harvest tends to be destructive, which means that you have to actually destroy the combs to harvest the honey. The advantage of the Langstroth hive is you use standard Langstroth equipment. You can put it in a radial extractor. It's a non-destructive harvest. And the main thing is the equipment's widely available. Both of those hive styles can be adapted for lots of mobility restrictions. We have a top bar hive in our education apiary that articulates so that someone in a wheelchair can roll right up to it and the whole thing articulates and faces them right at them. So they're very easy hives to work with. And so, yeah, I'd say either one is a good choice. The Kenyan top bar hives tend to be cheaper because there's less equipment than the Langstroth. So those are kind of the pros and cons of each. And short form.
And then Allie has a question about, is there a version of bee stewardship to support carpenter bees? Allie is in Southern Arizona.
Carpenter bees are a fun one. Those are a bee that lots of people have a love-hate relationship with because they do a number on your decking, but they're great. They're great native bees. I don't know of any stewardship programs that are going on around that. We're not in the Southwest, so but I would assume that, if you're looking to give them a place to be, most of the time you want to look into, it's mainly the hole size is what facilitates the type of bee that's going to actually nest in a cavity. So mainly the thing, if you wanted to start, helping carpenter bees, would be to look, it's like, what is the hole size that I need to put and the depth of the cavity that I need to make. And that's how we basically make a lot of native bee nests, is just based on size and depth of the hole.
Olivia asks about feasibility for beekeeping for younger populations. in community gardens or schools? Any thoughts or recommendations on what kind of the proper age might be for the hands-on activities?
That's where I wanted to speak. So anybody could speak, but I have something to say on that.
I know we've done programs for youth ages about 9, starting at 9, in community run programs. Here on the farm, we'll take even a little bit younger if their parents are with them. But you know, waivers and just ensuring that you have the proper equipment goes a really long way. But you know, if I mean, the other option that we use is observation hives. You can do, you know, ones with plexiglass in them. They can get very up close and personal. That does take a beekeeper, because you'll have to, you know, you take a hive from a frame from a hive, put it in the observation hive, and then it goes back into the hive itself. So there's a lot of different ways to adapt to that. And then there's some educational hives as well that you can use that have really beautiful pictures in the frames, and that can be used to take to different schools and stuff. So I think there are different ways to do that. Have anything to add?
I'd say just the main thing is liability when working with children and bees. And the big thing that you always have to consider is most children do not know if they are allergic or not. And so the potential for a child to be stung and have there's only 2% of the population that has anaphylaxis and with bee stings, but because they've never had, a lot of those kids have never experienced honeybee stings, you just don't know. And that's a huge liability for the organization that's providing the service. And we've gone back and forth with attorneys about that a long time. So just something to be aware of.
So I could say, on top of all that, you guys have the great equipment. One of the things we did was at the farmers market 3 years ago. We had a little booth where we called the Queen's Residence and the Queen's Workshop. And so we were introducing the fact that we needed a bee box, basically a Langstroth, for next year when we brought a new queen in. And I thought, well, the best way to do that would be to introduce the house. So we introduced the concepts of having bees that take care of bees and bees that do the other things, all the jobs and so on and so forth. And each of the kids painted the Langstroth sides. You know, I put them out on a table and they put the little butterflies and everything, and everybody had a great time for a couple of days. So it was a very exciting event. You didn't know bees involved, all in your head. The beauty of that is that's the box, or one of the boxes I'm putting on today or this week for the new queen that's coming. So that box 3 years ago was a community involvement of an art project that is now becoming a live hive, which I'm documenting. So all the people that worked on that are on a list. So I'll do is contact them, and at least they have an interest in bees and an interest in beehives and beekeeping. They could move on from there. It's up to them. But it was pretty successful, I think, in that regard.
Yeah, that's great.
Throw it out there.
Can
Yeah.
I
pretty-
talk for a second on this subject too, a little bit? We do run quite a lot of different types of children's programs through our organization. We do an educational program where they have hands-on experience. They're not exposed to bees. There are lots of different levels, but something that we do a lot with our program is we work with a lot of different special needs organizations. We work with the ARC of Carroll County. We have adult needs services that is actually coming out to the farm tomorrow. The thing is, there's lots of different entities to beekeeping that all kinds of different groups and different levels can participate. So it's, you know, being creative and how you create and structure your educational program. So I do have a beekeeping shadow. He is autistic. He turned 18 in September, and he's been working with me as my beekeeping sidekick. There's not a lot of limitations, but there's limitations to beekeeping, and that's really truly being creative, like, you know, choosing the right hive styles that work for you and for who you're going to be working with, knowing what age levels you're going to be working with and what their capabilities are. When you're working with really young kids, you know they're going to need hands-on, but you can't have hands-on bees. You're going to have hands-on learning activities like constructing candles and headbands and finger puppets and all kinds of neat stuff, seed bombs. There's all kinds of great options to be able to teach youngsters about bees. So as they get older and they have that interest in beekeeping, that you keep them interested and keep coming back for more experiences as they grow.
Maybe just to sneak one last question in here from Kendra. She was curious about this is for you, Adam and Lacey, if there's a specific way you structured the different practices that you mentioned into your program.
Yeah, it really depends on what we're doing, right? Specifically for beekeeping, you know, we've always started with breath work, just because it's, you know, it's the first thing to go in stressful times, right? Is our breath. It gets shallow and quick and all of a sudden without our breath, then, you know, we're not thinking clearly, and all of these things are happening. So, and it happens so fast in the apiary. So especially when there's bees bopping you and a lot of activity is happening all at once. So really, you know, what is the necessity of the activity that you're doing? What is necessary? So breath work and then body work, knowing that when we go into the apiary, we're going to be lifting a beehive and turning so frequently. You know, our middle backs, our lower back, all of these things are gonna be stressed. And so how do we get in touch with the body enough to know what we need to activate as we're standing in the apiary and working beehives? So that's kind of how we've structured it in the past. And then from there, you know, all of the grounding and mindfulness practices that kind of bring us back to the present moment versus allowing the brain to kind of do its thing in story or work in fear or overwhelm that can happen in the apiary.
And I would also just offer that, you know, a lot of the practices that we discussed, not all of them are something that you're going to do before you go work bees. Like, you know, the gratitude work is stuff that you can do anytime. And so we not only incorporate them into like the workshops that we do, which is typically we do a wellness activity before we enter into the bee yard. But it's also something that we're facilitating that kind of idea that this is not something that you just do every time you work your bees every couple weeks. It's something that you can incorporate into your daily life.
That's
and
right.
so, you know, a gratitude walk through the apiary, giving gratitude to the bees for all the gifts that they give us, that's something that you can do without even putting a bee suit on. And so it's not just, you know, practices that are incorporated into the days we're working bees. We're trying to provide these practices as kind of just a regular kind of wellness opportunity for people to incorporate into their daily lives.
Well, what a beautiful way to end this session together. And in the spirit of gratitude, again, thank you to all of you who presented. You are inspiring I feel like I could listen to you all day. Thank you for everyone who spent time this afternoon learning more about therapeutic beekeeping. And we will be sharing this presentation, as I mentioned, both slide presentations as well as the recorded presentation afterwards. So you can watch again or share with others. So we have some events coming up and you can always find them on our website. We'll be meeting again in June for another monthly member gathering. So check us out there, and thank you and have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you.